They say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You can play any and every position. Coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And, oh, my goodness. Let's see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you. But what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, very happy to be your host. Please like, share, subscribe, join if you can, support Black Power Media in all the ways and shapes and forms possible, blackpowermedia.org included. Do all that you can to help us continue to grow. Thanks to all of you who have helped us so far. And we invite others to join us. Put this in your socials. If you're seeing this later, welcome to you as well. And let's get right into it because amazingly, even our comrade and colleague here is on time and in the building early. So let's get into this with our guests from Community Movement Builders, Curtis Duncan, Kiana Jones, and last but not least, Kamal Franklin, who is, as I told your comrades, I said, they popped up first. I said, no, it's not Kamal because he's never here this early. but amazingly, greetings to all of you. Thank you. Welcome to the program. I appreciate you all joining us. Peace.
How's everyone doing today?
Okay, good. Just making sure everybody.
Peace.
All right.
Thank you for having
us. So I want to look. I've been like everybody else trying to follow everything that you all have been among the leaders among the leadership of in the struggle against Cop City, and thought it was well past due that we try to have a discussion with all of you right here. So let's start, if we can, with some of the broad strokes in the history. First, before of Cop City, though, I did want to start with the broad strokes of the history of Community Movement Builders. So could we actually start there and talk about the work that you all do that has led you to this current fight around Cop City?
I guess I'll jump in with the broad strokes and folks can add. So it's like weird being on the Black Power Media Network and being interviewed, but okay, we'll do this.
The only way we could get you to associate yourself with the platform.
That's true. Very true. This is not going to be. It's not going to be a normal interview. It's not going to be a normal interview. So, Community Movement Builders was established in approximately 2015. As folks probably know, we started off with the community house in Southwest Atlanta. Through a donation and through many iterations that we've gone through, and we've worked our way up to being a solid organization where our primary work is really in two areas. One, I would say, is community organizing, and those areas are through community organizing is doing anti-gentrification work, particularly in Southwest Atlanta. And then the other area of work when it comes to organizing is doing anti-police brutality work, and that really started to take off after Rashard Brooks was killed in Atlanta in 2020, less than a mile away from our community house. We did work with the family. with the neighboring community and trying to bring a peace center from the Wendy's that was burnt down. That's where Rashard Brooks was killed. And that work continued into what's now become Cop City, because it was shortly after those 2020 uprisings that the city of Atlanta announced that it was doing Cop City. The other area of work I would say is in sustainable development. And there's a range of things that we do, everything from a sustainability fund to help keep folks in Southwest Atlanta in particular in their homes by paying mortgage, utility bills, rent, for anybody who needs it once every 6 months. We do for residents of approximately $750. We also have a mutual aid / liberation program where we're revamping it, but we're going to try to get back up to where we were doing 75 families every 2 weeks, approximately. And that included the families helping to pack and deliver, everybody doing political education before we began with deliveries, talking about things like capitalism, food deserts, why our community is the way it is, Black power, but what does it mean to fight for power? Cooperatives. And so we have several cooperatives, the most successful of which right now is a CMOS cooperative that we actually sell in stores. We have our first community worker owner who now is also a part of the organization. And so that's fantastic. So there's a whole bunch of different things we do that if anybody else wants to fill in, they can. But that's like sort of a basis. And you know, basically we are a Black organization that strives to fight for self-determination and power in our community and across the country. So I'll leave it there, let other folks join in.
Right on.
You
Curtis,
summed it up quite well, CMB landlord.
Curtis is going to have lots of jokes. He's my spades partner. Yeah. I also beat him at times too, and we play against each other, but just to let you know.
So
not really, but so I got you.
Just keep that in mind when I think I'll be down there this summer. So I don't know who I'm going to end up partnered with, but as long as they know how to hold their own, don't stick me with no slouches. We can run this table. I will. Yeah. So don't, and like I say, don't take this ass personal, you know. So anyway, Kiana, Curtis, did you want to say anything more about CMB? Or even maybe why you all joined? Like what attracted you to that organization as opposed to the countless others that exist at this point?
So I joined in 2020. I lived maybe about a mile from where Rashard Brooks was killed. And I was politicized at an early age into Black nationalism, Pan-Africanism, yeah, so like, you know, a lot of Black radical politics. So, you know, I appreciated the work that CMB was doing, and I was a loyal listener of Renegade Culture, you know, and I just kind of, you know, started, I guess, you know, sending my little coins to CMB because I appreciate the work that they were doing, particularly in Atlanta against gentrification. So, yeah, and then one day, I joined one of the events that they had in 2020, you know, against Rashard Brooks' murder. And then I reached out to Kamal and I was like, hey, you want to do like some mutual aid work? Because I have a small business. And he was like, sure. And then Kamal pretty much like, he pretty much threatened me to join CMB, you know, against my will. So, you know, but no, I appreciate the work that they were doing.
It's Brooklyn in the house.
Yeah, you know, he was like, yo, son, when you gonna join? I was like, I don't know. You know, he was like, all right, well, I'm signing you up. I'm like, okay. So, you know, that's pretty much how it went down. You know,
how do you think this interview got set up?
Huh?
Son, how do you think this interview got set up? Son, we need to interview. CMB, yeah, you know. Set it up. There you have it.
So, yeah, so I've been involved in mutual aid, of course, in Cop City. I remember me and Kamal like 2 years ago, I was like, man, you know, because I remember when they passed, the city council passed the vote. I was like, yo, what we going to do about Cop City? He's like, man, we're just going to organize. I was like, all right, you know, because I was feeling kind of down about it. And it's definitely been a long, protracted struggle, but I'm definitely very proud to be a part of CMB. I love the work that they do. Yeah, and that's my story.
Kiana, you want to jump in?
Yeah, my story isn't quite as illustrious. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're hesitating a little bit. that I don't know that is this,
I may
is
not
this
be on the good
CMB
Wi-Fi.
internet?
Y'all know I live in Decatur.
Yeah.
It absolutely is not. It must be my very lagging internet over here in Decatur. You know, since I moved back over farther to the east side, maybe if I ain't giving what it's supposed to give,
Well, the
but
sound
we're
is
going
good at
to
least.
try
So
anyway.
yeah.
Okay.
You sound good.
So maybe lagging a bit, but my story is not as illustrious as Curtis's story. I was out here organizing with one of the better known rights and civic engagement organizations that claim to organize the new Georgia majority, which means that they claim that all of their people are Black, Indigenous, LGBTQIA+, Latinx people, and that these people are priorities too. However, within that organization, they had more white supremacy going on than I have ever seen. So in organizing with the organization, it became an issue for me because I really felt like I was not being true to who I am. Black as hell. And I'm always Black. So that organization that was supposed to be organizing and prioritizing and marginalized people wasn't doing that. So when I decided to quit, because it literally went against my personal principles to work there, I took pity on me and gave me a job. So I was like, all right, then I'm gonna just be over here.
I'll add briefly that Kiana was already doing a lot of Stop Cop City work and had gotten a reputation as being the movement speaker. Her background is as a reverend. And it got to a point where nobody wanted to go behind or go after Kiana when she would speak. And so when she said she was leaving the other organization, which I guess will remain nameless, it made a lot of sense to sort of whatever resources we had to help support her because of the work that she was doing was already so fantastic on Cop City. So that's how we got her.
Right on. There's a number of things, and as always, if I don't invite something out of you all in any of these questions, please just bring it up. But I did also want to do a quick history and origin specifically of this Cop City project, just as a recap, if we could, for anybody who happens to not be, fully up to date, including myself. You said, and I thought I even heard you say you all found out about this through sort of an underground communicative process. Like, again, it wasn't said, nobody came out and said, hey, what do you all think about this? Let's talk about it in advance of it happening. And, let's move on. It just sort of, so let's start with, how did you all hear about it? What is Cop City? And some of the details too, like where is it? How big is it? All of that kind of stuff. But let's start with that. How did you all hear about it and why did it come out like that?
So I can start, Curtis, and you can jump in if we desire. So we found out, as stated, it was like, after the 2020 uprisings, different information began to leak from the city council, and then other organizers and activists, particularly, I guess, those who are a little closer to some of the voting rights groups, started talking about this thing that was being built in Southeast Atlanta, or at least a proposal to build it in Southeast Atlanta. Now, there's supposed to be a whole process when these things happen in terms of public hearings, and people getting a chance to voice what they think should happen or should not happen, or why this is happening at this particular point in time. All of that process seemed to be not put together, vacated, not even thought about being done. At the time, the complete city council, the mayor's office, the Atlanta Police Department, the Atlanta Police Foundation, all were in complete agreement on making sure that this Cop City, as we called it, this new police training ground, was going to be built. They already had the ideas that they wanted to put it in what we call Wilani Forest, that they were going to basically tear down, clear cut, deforest well over 90 acres at the beginning of the process. We know that the land that they're leasing is close to 300 acres and more deforestation can take place. And as the stuff started to come out, and again, the iterations that they themselves publicized early on was a paramilitary military grade training center for the police, one that would have over 12 firing ranges, one that would have space for a Black Hawk helicopter landing pad, one that would practice urban warfare. All those things were part of their early and their gleeful early design, which they stated themselves was being put forth to lift the morale of the police post, again, the 2020 uprising. So I think we as organizers right away saw this. And again, some of these plans were laid way before 2020, but they were released after the uprisings. And we saw this right away as not only a continuation of the militarized policing and a stepping up of militarized policing in Black and brown communities, but also as a reaction to the movements which they felt they were flat-footed to contain during the 2020 uprisings. And that this was an opportunity for not only them in terms of the Atlanta Police Department, but for them to build a training center that was big enough to do training across the country. And again, as we talk about internationally with other police forces, i.e. the Israeli police force, and other folks have brought in and let us know recently that the Germany, various cities in Germany will also be doing some training there, that this was a worldwide project. And that this issue was not strictly what was going to happen here in Atlanta, but something that was going to impact militarized policing all across the country, targeting movements again, but continuing to target Black communities as it destroyed a forest in a Black community that was promised for the use of that community that now was going to go towards the police. So we saw that all as a reason to, and not only us, but other organizers and activists, environmentalists, folks around the city, to jump in and say, like, we cannot have this thing built. We have to fight as hard as we can to stop this process from happening.
Well, I mean, but to be fair, we can't have another failure like Black Hawk Down in Somalia. So we might as well to get their game straight on Africans over here so they can get it right again and go back. You can't have, so we need the, so, but I want to be clear. So, and I just as even a reminder to me, Cop City was not, I mean, that's the moniker ascribed to it by activists. Their version is it is officially just a training center. Is that what they're called?
A public safety training facility.
And then I've just seen what your mayor apparently yesterday called it. He's got a new, well, for me at least, a new phrase. And I want to come to the article I'm referencing here, but they call it that Scalawag is accusing him of, I'm sorry for even, I don't know why I'm laughing. It's sick. Branding a police training paradise as a technology of care.
Their earliest iterations of it included a short video in which they kind of dubbed it something that was out of the process of the civil rights movement, right? It was King was in the video, Dr. King, the history of the civil rights movement. And then we go forward into today's time and we have the police shaking hands with people in the community. So since its origins, their propaganda game, weak, but has continued to be the position as something that the community either needs, has asked for, or is being driven out of concern for the community through the history of civil rights. And again, naming Dr. King, as they always like to do in these situations, to bring forth this idea.
I want to come back to this article and to ask you about it in a second, but specifically to your point, and Dickens apparently was evoking the North Star, Frederick Douglass again, and of course John Lewis, saying that he was following the marching orders of John Lewis in an attempt to redeem the soul of the city via branding the police training paradise as a technology of care. I mean, that is the marketing. I mean, people, that is beautiful. Oh my goodness. Anyway, Kiana, did you all want to?
Yeah, I definitely want to jump in just to say, in addition to everything that Kamal has described, what Cop City is one of the biggest disparagements to a Black community in environmental racism. That community where they are proposing to build Cop City is my neighborhood, where I was born and raised, where I remember landfills being in that area. Those landfills are still there, though not in use. But I also remember The firing range that is still in use at the property currently, that firing range is in use 24 hours a day. So you have children at an elementary school and at a high school that are both right nearby. Like the high school is literally right behind it. The elementary school is about a half a mile away. Those children are hearing gunfire the entire time that they are in school. So you got third graders at recess getting used to gunshots. Why? Because they live in Southeast Atlanta, which is also Southeast DeKalb County, which is unincorporated DeKalb at that point. Number one, their parents can't vote for the mayor, so he don't give a damn about them children or their parents. Number two, we Black. So we should be used to gunfire, right? Because those are the things that they're calling in the police for. So you have this type of crazy juxtaposition of reasoning when it comes down to so-called crime and the causes of crime and then the remedies for crime. You want these children to be okay hearing gunfire. You want these children to be okay seeing an increased police presence at all times. You want these children to be okay drinking water that is already polluted from the lead, from the bullets that run off into the water from the wastewater treatment facility that's already there. You want these children to be okay hearing gunshots, but not having a park to go to. Tell me how that makes sense. You want these children to be okay hearing gunfire and seeing police officers all the time and being harassed by police. You want these children to be okay with that, but you don't want them to understand the value of all the trees that are there. You don't want those children to understand what those trees do for their quality of air, what they do for the quality of life. And you don't want to save the South River, which is the second most endangered river in the United States. The South River is the headwater of one of the largest water systems in the state of Georgia. It goes all the way down to the Altamaha River down in Darien and going on through Savannah. You want to take away what we need as a vital part of our environmental infrastructure in endangering Entrenchment Creek, which is part of the reason why all of the sewage from the north side of DeKalb County doesn't just come here and stop. But you're willing to do that in this community, but you won't do it in North Cobb. You won't do it in Buckhead. You won't do it in North Fulton County. You won't do it in any of the other blighted properties that the city of Atlanta owns within Atlanta proper, because you're going to save those for developers for you to get your kickbacks. But we're going to do it over here in this Black ass area that's always been this way. And if you really cared so much about police even, or about that area, why hadn't the city of Atlanta done anything for East Atlanta heretofore? I'm 43 years old. In 43 years, they've done nothing for East Atlanta except come and take our land, because they don't have to worry about us not voting for them, or so they think. And because they've been the victims of environmental racism for ages, they're going to be okay with it. So Cop City is not only a detriment in the symbolism of militarized policing and what that does to our communities, but Cop City is a detriment because you are literally taking 381 acres of forest land and destroying it. So my Black ass don't deserve to breathe clean air. My children don't deserve to drink clean water. My neighbors don't deserve to go to school in peace. Like, have you any idea the effects of that type of noise on the minds of children? They can't think critically. They can't concentrate. They are not going to perform well academically because they have this constant gunfire that they're hearing all the time. Think about what it is for an 8-year-old boy every night to jump out of bed and run up to your room because there's gunshots. That's my story. That's my 8-year-old son that was waking up every single night to gunshots. So there's a whole lot to unpack when it comes down to Cop City, what it is and what it is not. And what we know that it is not is good for our community.
Wow. I'm frankly, I'm not even that uncomfortable, I'll say it this way, with guns. But not too long ago, we had to take our youngest to her soccer tournament up in, I guess this is Northern Maryland, and up in Aberdeen and all these areas, Cecil County, and not far from apparently gun ranges. And they're playing a soccer tournament, kids all over the place. And in the background, you're hearing explosions, high caliber weapons. So it was disturbing. It was a tournament day of disturbing background noise. And I kept thinking, and none of the, I was like, nobody's got a problem with this. And clearly what you're suffering is an exaggerated extension of, they don't have a problem with this. But the good news is, Curtis, or anyone else, the Germans are involved. So Germany's involved.
It's not even a good thing. And well, another thing to emphasize about Cop City is that this is a private police training project. The facility is actually owned by the Atlanta Police Foundation, and the Atlanta Police Foundation has its early roots, I think in 2002. But overall, most police foundations were created after the murder of Mike Brown, because essentially, when we took to the streets to protest the police killings, it was thought, okay, we need to have another outlet to fund the police just in case the whole defund movement really catches hold. So this project is essentially an economic development project. It's a private project for the Atlanta Police Foundation. And what the city of Atlanta plans on doing is that, okay, even though it's going to cost $90 million, the city of Atlanta plans to allocate $33.5 million to the Atlanta Police Foundation so they can build their police training playground. So it's going to be a revenue generator for the Atlanta Police Foundation. And they'll be training police officers from Israel. They'll be training police officers from all around the country. So it's going to be actually like a what they call economic development project. And the mayor has lied on many times, when he's been asked, like, hey, is this an economic development project? He's like, no, this is a police training facility. But it's actually not owned by the city of Atlanta. It's owned by all the corporations that control the Atlanta Police Foundation. So behind all the tokeism, wokeism, all of the invocations of MLK and the North Star and Black liberation, and we're gonna stop mass shootings like they recently had in Atlanta, are white corporations and white conservatives like the Koch brothers, because the major funders of the Atlanta Police Foundation are Home Depot, Georgia Pacific, that's owned by Koch Industries, Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, Chase Manhattan Bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and a who's who, also Norfolk Southern, who recently obliterated the entire town in Ohio. So you have a who's who of major multinational corporations, banks.
But several of those banks, Curtis, have invested in Greenwood Bank. So come on now.
They should,
because
they've taken Black people's money for how long? I mean, Wells Fargo was the #1 subprime lender to Black people.
So it's all coming back.
And what happens is that they do this so that they can appear to really be about certain principles that they believe that people hold dear, right? It's the same way the Arthur Blank Foundation will give to New Georgia Project and the NAACP, but will turn around and fund the APF as they do. Sometimes they funnel it through the Woodruff Foundation, who does the same thing. It's the same
Falcons,
way.
right?
The Falcons and the Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks Foundation.
And the soccer team. Doesn't he have a soccer team too?
Atlanta Hawks Foundation literally just got a proclamation from the city of Atlanta for some DEI BS, but they are a funder of the APS. And you cannot forget about your good old cop chicken, Chick-fil-A.
Oh, yeah.
All up in there.
Gosh. But
and the waffles
at least
are
observe the Sunday
Waffle
Sabbath,
House.
though,
Like,
right, Kiana?
You can't have your cop chicken and waffles.
Yeah.
Oh man. I do want to come back to this question actually of the corporations and corporate involvement, both directly in Cop City and in the media coverage of Cop City. But there were a couple other things I wanted to ask you all about in advance of that. One of them quickly is a discussion of community movement builders and your work in coalition with other organizations. One of the subtexts of a lot of the conversations we have around here obviously is organizational work. And as someone more or less on the sidelines at this point, I'm very interested in how organizations, who shows up, what the coalition building is like, whatever you can share about that experience of working with others on this issue and what that may mean for broader movement politics and work?
I will start that one off real quick, right? I'm gonna start that off real quick like this. So how I first came to know of community movement builders is when I was working for that other organization that was in a coalition with community movement builders, the Communities Over Cages Coalition, and they were very much invested in the closing of the Atlanta City Detention Center. Now, it seems like an organization who was invested in the closing of the Atlanta City Detention Center would also be invested in stopping a militarized police training facility in a city where we have a horrible police brutality problem, where we are currently in federal court with the people who murdered Jamarian Robinson and Jimmy Atchison and Kane Rogers and all these other people. But that particular organization was in coalition for Communities Over Cages. They tentatively joined this coalition against Cop City, but then all of a sudden, that Arthur Blank money was calling. All of a sudden, Andre Dickens' office was calling. And the next thing you know, where are they? They're nowhere to be found. So you have these organizations, these big name organizations that carry so much weight when we talk about Black organizations and voting rights. We talk about stuff like the People's Agenda. We talk about Pro-Georgia. We talk about New Georgia Project. We talk about these organizations that carry so much weight with Black people, but at the end of the day, they are literally turning their backs on us when it comes down to the issues that arise out of Cop City. So there are people who will say that they're in coalition, but they ain't coalescing with us. I don't know what they're doing. Those in particular have refused to even do so much as release a statement just saying that they're against the militarization of police. Like, we're not even asking you for a lot. We're really just saying fundamentally, based on the things that you organize people around, based on the things that you use to mobilize people to vote, this project represents a lot of that. We got reproductive justice organizations that won't even stand with us. Economic justice foundations that won't stand with us. But those are the ones who get their money from the Arthur Blank Foundations and the Atlanta Hawk Foundation and, you know, the Cox Enterprises. Those organizations take that money and they are more than happy to be silent on this one. One, because they feel like it's a losing battle, but two, because they are really about money first, the same way these corporations are who serve the APF.
I mean, I will add that, you know, early on in the organizing of Cop City, before, or I would even say slightly before, there was an organization called DARK that was an organization that was led by Black women. And part of that, you know, their major campaign became the fight against Cop City. And early on, you know, they were associated with, let's say, a socialist light organization that they felt started to take credit for their work and or started to step in when that work started to get some attention. And so there's been battles on the ground around this fight against Cop City, even in its early days. And what does it mean to do this work, right? But even with that said, part of the earliest work that was being done, we, you know, even though we're a grassroots organization, we have a legal structure. Most of the organizations that were doing this work and the individuals were not associated with anybody that we would be considered, any name that we would know, right? They were grassroots organizations, individuals associated with certain politics, i.e. anarchist politics, organizations like ours, smaller Black liberation type organizations. That was the nucleus of the organizing that happened really early on in Cop City, but kept the momentum going in terms of fighting back during or before the police, the city council's vote against Cop City. And then after the city council vote that basically gave Mayor Dickens the ability to sign a lease, when the strategy moved to being a force defender strategy as one of the primary ways in which we kept this fight going, i.e. people going into the forest, staying in the forest, sleeping in the forest. That continued to bring attention and continue to allow, many of us to continue to do street rallies, and again, to continue to do town halls, to get folks to call into their local officials to fight back against through direct action and other means against the actual developers who were starting to be rounded up to work on this project. So all of that became the glue that held this project going for literally over a year and a half. And because of the success of the delay, and the ability of the on-the-ground coalition to stick together, let's say at that point, when there was direct action done, and by direct action, I mean when a bulldozer or some other equipment was burned or sabotaged, and the media would come to groups like ours and say, hey, look, they're messing up the movement. Don't you have something to say about them? We were all explicit in saying, look, there's no such thing for us as good activists and bad activists. You will not separate us from our comrades and other organizers who are doing this work, because we believe in the diversity of tactics, right? But you've yet to comment, you being the media, on the violence that's taken place by the police since the early days of organizing. When we would do simple street marches, the cops would break into those marches and arrest people. When those marches were over, they would come, and whoever was lingering, folks would get arrested. They weren't charged at that point with domestic terrorism, but they were charged with disorderly conduct, obstruction of governmental administration, resisting arrest. They were arrested early that no one really talked about during those time periods. But the coalition, again, held together because we knew through study, through understanding of how this stuff works, that the media and the city itself would take certain tacks to divide and conquer that coalition. And, when it became obvious that the city was going to be in coalition, in its own coalition through task force of trying to criminalize this movement, and by using mechanisms and means, including domestic terrorism charges, and then later the actual killing of an environmental activist, and we got the attention. I will say, to the credit of other organizations that did not first throw down, everybody saw this. So a lot of groups saw this and began to try to throw down. Now, I know people have various rationales and reasons for why they do, but we need a big tent grassroots campaign in order to win this struggle. And so at this particular stage, this coalition has now grown. And it's grown in different ways, not always everybody playing nice with each other, not even going to suggest that that's what's happening, but it's grown in a way which we've sort of found, let's say, our different slots where we know we play in, but we have some communication to say, like, and again, sometimes that's late communication, because there've been some things that were done. It was like, I don't know why I did that, but like, why'd you do it then as opposed to later? But what's kept it going is that we've remained, and I think, in a good way, Community Movement Builders has played a particular role in helping to make sure that various actors found their different roles within the organizing among this, and continue to try to do what we could do to support it, but also making sure that folks understood, like, this is not about co-optation. This is not about folks running in once or twice, getting their name on something and going to get a bank, right? That folks got to be in it for a long haul. They got to dedicate resources. They got to do what they're good at. And they got to be in communication with the very people who've been doing this since the beginning. And I think we've played a particular role in trying to keep that all together. And again, so, that no matter what happens with the future of this fight, we've done something here in Atlanta that's established a left pole, a left force that will get us ready for future fights. And I think the city knows that. I think the city council knows that. I think these mainstream news outlets know that. And I think that's also what's running them a little scared. But we know that we're setting that up for the future.
So you don't think this is it? This isn't the last fight and we're done? There's future.
Yeah. Even if we won, I mean, I tell people too, like, even if we won Cop City, like, even if we stopped it from being built, that would be only a temporary respite from the work that we have to do. So winning or losing on this, it's not about it's not about the issue of Cop City per se. Cop City is a means and mechanism that furthers the capitalist infrastructure for the gentrification of the city, for the criminalization and the removal of working class and poor Black people from this city. It is a use of a project to further that. But obviously, this project is much bigger than that, and it's something that we have to understand, that the fight is not about what's happening now. The fight is now, and it is the future.
You mentioned this media coverage, and I was fascinated to see in this story that I saw this morning from Scalawag out loud on the Gate City front, and they're talking about the Pack City Hall effort. But within that, and I'm happy to hear you talk about that as well. But within that, they're saying here, narrative control is war strategy. And I think that's well said. At present, Southern alternative media outlets are engaged in the struggle against partners as powerful as Cox Media, Turner Broadcasting, Warner Brothers, CNN, and the rest of the film, media, sports, and music industry interests that compose Atlanta's entertainment industrial complex. The rebels, whose role is in battle is to circulate the stories that convey the grave stakes of Cop City and inventions that serve as infrastructures for the expansion of the violent police state, have in many ways taken on comparable risks to those on the ground at direct actions. That's interesting. I'm not familiar with all the media work that they're talking about doing there, but in general, I'm familiar with the history of that kind of struggle. But just a little bit more here, the article says that the state's narrative machine sought to strike back against the momentum of Monday's action when Mayor Dickens himself published this op-ed for the city's most widely circulated outlet, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The AJC, which is owned by Cox Media Group, functions in the war on Cop City narrative in many ways that are reminiscent of its role in the making of the New South City itself. It was the dueling predecessors of its present iteration, the Atlanta Constitution and the Atlanta Journal, that were central to the anti-Black media hysteria that sparked the 1906 race massacre. I thought that was interesting. I hadn't thought about that, and I'm very interested to hear you all talk about that as well. Slightly more here, the role in big media in circulating state narratives that stimulate anti-Black hysteria around rising urban crime rates and the terrorist threats forest defenders pose to the existing and emerging order owe their origin to the technologies of safety patented at the dawn of the 20th century, the same ones that secured urban futurities against the threat of post-emancipation Black migration in the afterlife of the plantocracy. The Southern War reporter Ida B. Wells Barnett reminds us throughout her work on lynching laws that the legal code of law and order, including the zoning code, rules of civic decorum, threats of regional secession, and cultures of exclusion, are all reforms intended to preserve capital and secure progress, absent the tarnished global representation of a city that lacks the capacity to control the most insurgent members of its constituency. Put differently, there is no advancement of the technologies of state repression without racial hysteria about the end or absence of order. As the revolutionary psychiatrist Frantz Fanon reminds us, Blackness, which is symbolically represented as a biological threat to futurity, means that the only way to sell the idea of a modern corporate capitalist state is to present it as equally capable of attracting and securing capital, policing deviance, and extinguishing even the possibility of insurgent anarchic activities. Wow. Any reactions or thoughts or embellishments on any of that from anybody?
Hard to embellish on that. I mean, that is succinctly put, and it covers the entire ground when we talk about narrative and what it takes in order to make people really buy into something like Cop City. We know that there are some white supremacists who have no problem buying into it because that's how they live every day. But there are also some left-leaning, middle-class white mothers who might believe in defunding the police, but not necessarily abolishing the police. And for those people, you got to scare the daylights out of them. It's the same way they win elections, the same way they get support for war. This is exactly what they are doing here. They are scaring people into submission. And what I notice is that Andre Dickens, like the propaganda, he's always playing catch up, because he knows, first of all, that we're hitting the game hard. We are hitting it hard. We are always on the ground. And yes, we do have alternative media outlets, because we know that Cox Enterprises is there to strictly serve the APF and Mayor Dickens himself. I mean, the whole thing about the APF is just making it so that police are really private enforcers, which is pretty much what they're doing. Police are serving capitalism and the corporations. But here we go with the reminder that it's always about the narrative, that the way we spin it and the way we frame it is extremely important. And I also believe that we have been doing a very good job within this movement of taking their narrative and crushing it. When they talk about all those supporting Cop City are just, oh, white outside agitators. And it's like, really? Are they? Or is it that you did a detainment and only chose to arrest white people who are from out of town? Is that what happened? Yes. When you say, oh, the people in the neighborhood want Cop City, but you literally went to those people who are on the initial task force that you created, wherein the stipulation was that you had to be in favor of the project. Does the community really want it? The few on your task force.
Wait, say that part again. What was
you should
about
know
a stipulation
that the city of Atlanta is the land of task forces. This is where task forces thrive and where they are created in such a robust fashion, but where there are stipulations. And for that particular task force, initially, you had to be in favor of the project. Oh, but don't worry, the mayor has seen the light and he has created a new task force wherein there are voices of dissent, namely 2. But 1 has already left that task force. So he's able to say, we have people for and against the project here. And this task force has recommended that we go forward in the best interest of the people of the city of Atlanta, because our cops, they need this morale booster. They need this in addition to the $500 bonuses that they get. They need this in addition to the money for housing in the Pittsburgh area that they get. They need this in addition to everything else that the union has strong-armed from the city. Oh, but wait a minute. The firefighters.
Wait a minute. Let's be clear. The second task force wasn't about the approval of Cop City. Before they could join, the mayor had already let everybody know, even though people seem not to understand this, that your role was picking shrubbery.
That's right.
Your role was like, where should the bushes go? Because it's going to be, it's going to get built. Your role is not to decide to get it built. Yeah, that's already.
Yeah, that was the second one. They are on the third task force now.
Yeah,
they're on the third task force now. So
what, you get to pick the color of the seats or something?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
So to mention the whole concept of narrative, I'll mention names. So some of the people who are on the current task force is Douglas Blackman, who wrote I think, what was the book? He talked about
Schooling for the New Slavery.
Yes.
No, I mean not that one.
Convict leasing.
I know. Yeah.
He wrote a great book.
Yeah, the prisons are the new slavery, right? That was it, something like that.
Exactly. He wrote a great book. There's some other people I don't want to,
But wait, he's involved with this?
Yes, he's on the task force. Yes, he is. Because the reason why is because the lands that where they're building Cop City, it was first Muskogee Creek lands. Then the white settlers and Andrew Jackson pushed them out, put them on the Trail of Tears. Then the land was turned into a plantation. After that, the land was turned into a convict leasing site. Then it became the Atlanta Prison Farm. So that's where Douglas Blackman comes in, because he has done a lot of research on the whole convict leasing system and how that was basically like modern day slavery.
Right.
So essentially, in order to honor the people who were genocided at the Atlanta prison farm, they are going to bring in Douglas Blackman to provide input on how to acknowledge those victims who were genocided at the farm. So essentially, we're going to have a cop city, and then we're going to have a little mural designed by Douglas Blackman to honor the victims of the Atlanta prison farm. So again, I mean, this is
he's not there to provide the historical context as to explain why this is all happening and why it should be walked back and eradicated. He's there to put some.
Only to put the historical context on a plaque so that you can read it on the way to the firing ranges.
Yeah.
So
right down
well, he already made. I guess he made his career and his name off of talking about Black suffering. So why help Black people today, right? Is that what the logic is? Damn, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and
I like that book.
Yeah, it was a great book. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I would also say that one of the benefits of our movement is that we have gotten a lot of alternative media press. We've gotten, Natasha Leonard from The Intercept has written some really good articles about the whole Cop City movement. The Guardian, so the UK has been writing probably some of the best articles about Cop City. I think one of the ones I read recently, Jared, that you'd be interested in is how private equity is involved in just, this whole Cop City project and destroying the Atlanta forest. So behind all the black faces and behind all the civil rights and Andy Young and all this other, all this other bullshit, there's some billionaire money behind all this. So you have the Guardian, you have Vice News, you have AJ, you have the Rolling Stone, you have, I think the only time the Atlanta Journal-Constitution has ever published anything critical of Cop City has been Bernice King, and she wrote one op-ed. And that was the only time that they've allowed any type of alternative voices against Cop City. I think the most recent one that came out was from this white boy named Bill Torby. And he was like, yeah, if we're going to build Cop City, it can't be like a Rambo training ground. So they're kind of alluding to like what it's going to be in reality. But they always kind of like, well, let's just build it. And then, let's just build it and make sure it's really woke and make sure it's, it's really, we get community input and we have Douglas Blackman, we have murals and But once it's built, it's going to be some Rambo, Black Hawk helicopter, explosions everywhere, firing grounds. You ain't welcome on the facility. It's going to be like a military industrial, plantation police training killing site.
Right across the street from it, they're building. Now, real quick, right across the street from it, they're building, they're building like a SWAT training center.
Yep.
Well, yeah. So the SWAT training center is going to be there to, so when they have future protests, if me and Kamal come out there and Kiana, the SWAT team will be ready for us.
But wait, that's not part of Cop City.
No, it's separate. It's separate.
You can't say what are they doing in Cop City?
It's going to be for the safety of Cop City. So the SWAT team is going to be there on call 24/7 in case these domestic terrorists and white anarchists and socialists and left-wing activists and so they'll be there with the FBI and with ICE and with DHS.
Everybody.
Yeah,
even MARTA police. MARTA police gonna be there too.
Yeah, because that's another thing to mention as far as narrative control. I'm not sure if anyone has seen the movie How to Blow Up a Pipeline, but this movement kind of reminds me of that. That's a really good movie that I saw.
Say it again.
How to Blow Up a Pipeline. It was a movie that came out about it was a book written by I think this white author who was talking about like eco-sabotage and how these people who were trying to fight the oil industry, they took it upon themselves to blow up a pipeline. And how the feds got involved and labeled them domestic terrorists. Again, the terrorists aren't the people who are, polluting the environment, destroying the environment, destroying indigenous lands. The domestic terrorists are the people who are fighting against that. So it's really fascinating film about how about how it was just a group of just kind of ragtag activists.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but this
like it was us, pretty much.
This newspaper is calling it the film sinister propaganda.
Well, yeah. No. So I mean, so DHS, so DHS actually sent out a security alert, according to Intercept, that this film was actually a terrorist threat. So
yes.
Yeah, so DHS, this is under the DHS like terrorist threat watch list. So I guess for me, I bought a ticket to it. I'm on a terrorist now.
Well, there goes our second strike. My bad.
Yeah.
Whoops.
I'm just saying that's us. We are the domestic terrorists.
Yes.
We are anybody who expresses dissent to white male Christian patriarchal rule. You are a domestic terrorist. Anyone who believes in Black liberation at all costs, you are a domestic terrorist, because literally what you are doing threatens their system of government. It threatens the regular running and operation of this system of government. So we are all domestic terrorists. But what's amazing to me is that for those people who are calling us domestic terrorists, they seem okay with those white people who stormed the nation's capital on January 6th a couple of years ago doing that. Those are patriots, right? And not one of them, the ones who were convicted, by the way, of some shit, none of them got charged with domestic terrorism. And they went into the halls of the Capitol looking for the vice president to hang him, looking for Nancy Pelosi to maim her. They beat law enforcement officers in the halls of the Capitol. But they are not domestic terrorists, but simply because we have enough courage and wherewithal to stand up to police insurrection.
Well, come on now. Tucker Carlson
We are
just remind us
terrorists.
recently, white people don't fight like that. so
they fight fair.
They fight fair.
They
fight fair.
Commit genocide, slowly. Yeah.
It's fairly. It's all fair.
Yeah, they get us with the eco side. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I wanted to comment real quick on the media narrative piece also, because I think even in addition to the left or alternative media, and I know sometimes we are very critical of this stuff, but social media has played a huge role in allowing for the movement to put out messages that were alternative to mainstream, or that allowed us to put out sometimes first messages before the mainstream could even react, before the establishment knew it had a fight on its hands. And so the fact that we've dubbed it Cop City, and that's the moniker that has stuck throughout. Nobody really knows the name of the site except to know it is Cop City, right? A playground for the police. And that was something that, again, organizers and activists in their own creativity found different mechanisms and means to put it out there, to have it stick, to get out the information that the city, again, thought it was going to be benign type of information about what they were doing, and to characterize it in a way that made people understand that this was not simply a training center again. There's no reason for Atlanta, the 20th largest police force at best in the country, to have the largest police training center. All of those different types of information that they've had to react to, and even at least publicly suggest that they're changing the direction of the site in different ways because of the information that we exposed in terms of the Black Hawk helicopter landing pad. Now they're claiming that that's not going to be there. In terms of the dozen or so firing ranges, now they're claiming that that's not going to be there. And for us, part of that conversation is, you know what? In your lease, you can say whatever you want. In the lease, there is nothing that designates a specific development, what has to be on the development. The only thing that you have up is a website. And there's nothing about that website that makes you beholden. There's no legal force behind it. You can do what you want and change it anytime you want. And so I think, again, like the fact that the narrative fight has gone on even before a lot of our allies and friends in alternative media began putting out information or began even understanding what Cop City was about, was the sort of grassroots on the ground, using the tools that we all had at hand, which was social media, to expose and put forth actual facts that were countering and or getting ahead of what we knew the city and the Atlanta Police Foundation were eventually going to try to put out. So that stuff became really important to us. And it even allows us to fight back when the city finally decided it's going to put out a narrative, as Kiana mentioned, around the whites or the white anarchists and his out-of-towners. Our ability to fight back has only been because of the ability to marshal social media and to get that alternative press that Curtis was talking about.
So, but how did we get here? Because I thought we're in the post-George Floyd, we're in abolition and defund the police, and there's billions of dollars getting thrown around. We're talking about Atlanta, the Black Mecca, a whole bunch of Democrats and Black leadership and businesses and activists, etc., civil rights, all of whom are going to be maybe ducking for cover when that Freaknik documentary comes out, right? Is that still? Is that
ain't
still?
nobody looking for their old asses now.
No,
Ain't nobody.
you're not gonna see Andy Young in a quarter. No, just put allegedly, just jokes. Yeah. I don't want the African litigious community to come after us again. Just jokes.
It's already done. It's already done.
Right. But seriously though, like, wasn't there any positive momentum after all of these recent years that would have slowed this down? Or I guess not.
Absolutely not. We've seen a lot of performative gestures, but the overwhelming sentiment of these Black electeds in the state of Georgia, in the city of Atlanta particularly, pretty much has been, if you can't beat them, join them. Because you got that Black Democratic mayor of the city of Atlanta having dinner with Kelly Loeffler and Brian Kemp, Republican governor who don't like Black people. Kelly Loeffler, racist as all get out, lost her basketball team because of that. But these are people that you would break bread with. What in the world could you possibly have in common with them if you are not the same? So we see who you really are, Dre. We see what you're really about, and we see who you really serve. We look at these same state legislators here in the state of Georgia who will sit and get defeated by these racist ass Republicans as they pass anti-trans legislation, but then go out and play kickball with them. There is nothing moving.
Not kickball.
Kickball, no less.
Kickball is sacred. We can't be messing with kickball. That's kickball, very no special less. And close.
I am just letting you know.
Family and kinfolk.
Yeah. Look, this is the way it goes down in the state of Georgia. Wow. I mean, you might have heard the term. We use it frequently. It's called the Atlanta way.
Hey, I'm going to have to
whitewashed in blackface.
I'm going to have to jump, but I want to say that because I hope you guys get into this discussion that both of you alluded to. Is the class analysis of the Black misleadership class, Black bourgeoisie, which continually sides and is a part of the capitalist structure or the development class. And that's who they work for. I mean, it's probably been who they've always worked for, but it's never been more obvious than now that we have a huge class issue within our community where these folks who claim to be standing for our folks are using representative politics in order to convince people that they're here to support Black folks who are doing nothing but opening the door and paving the way for these developers, for this, again, this gentrification, which has taken hold in Atlanta and other places. You have a class issue. You have obviously a democratic issue of these local politicians claiming again to stand for certain people, but really they're doing nothing but standing for the development class. So I just think that should be a bigger conversation. I will see you guys.
Thank you, Kamal. Appreciate you. Peace. All right, now we can get down to business. Now we got rid of Kamal. Let's get down to business. Let's get serious. Let's get serious. No, but did either of you want to say anything more about this issue of class? Because again, it maybe not so much certainly in our regular audiences, but in some pockets of the world, I do think it is still confusing to people to see the surface level appearance of Atlanta as the Black Mecca, and be confused. It can be confused by what policies and actions end up coming out from. So please, if you would add on to that.
Yeah. So the Black Mecca is a propaganda term. It was largely invented, I believe, like in the 1960s, when Atlanta was going through the whole civil rights movement, and they were actually, they actually tried to bring in Hank Aaron, to kind of, to pacify the people, make it seem like, oh, Atlanta's a city of progress, because essentially, what happened in Atlanta was that because of, as Kiana mentioned, the Atlanta way, you had, to kind of bring it back. 1906, Atlanta was definitely a major, a lot of formerly enslaved Black people moved to Atlanta, and they started to build economic and political power. And this upset the white working class and, of course, the white elites. So then the white elites used the Atlanta Journal and the Atlanta Constitution to create like a fake lynching story about how a Black man lynched a white woman, and basically calling for vigilante justice, which led to the Atlanta Race Massacre. One thing to emphasize about the Atlanta Race Massacre, and I think it was even mentioned in the book We Will Shoot Back by Dr. Akinyele Umoja, Black people were shot back at the white mobs that attacked them during the Race Massacre. So there was a degree of militancy amongst Black people within the city, where it's like, hey, these white mobs are coming into these communities, but they're getting their heads blown off. But still, it was a situation where this Atlanta Race Massacre was, essentially it happens to push back on the Black and economic power of Black people who live within the city. So as a result of that, some of the Black elites, some of the Black capitalists got with the white elites. Like, okay, how do we prevent, future Black rebellion? Because we're not going to stop the white supremacists from, lynching Black people within the city of Atlanta or in Georgia. That didn't happen. But essentially, they wanted to figure out a way of pacifying the Black community. So they were like, okay, well, within the city of Atlanta, we'll kind of ease some of the really kind of some of the overt Jim Crow. So we'll kind of give Black people some access to power. We won't have, such a really strong, rigid streetcar segregation policy. So that was kind of like the paradigm that, essentially we're trying to prevent Black rebellion. And definitely, we don't want any more good white folks getting their heads blown off when they attack Black people. So, and I think even Dr. King was a part of that Black elite. I'm sorry, Dr. King's family. Interesting thing to note about Dr. King was that I think in 1934, they had, I think, what was it? It was they had a Gone with the Wind musical, where they had, I think it was Daddy King's church. They had like the Black people kind of playing pickaninnies for this white audience. Like it was like some wild stuff. I forget what book I read that in, but essentially Dr. King was kind of like a pickaninny to entertain white people for the Gone with the Wind, which is, of course, this whole plantation, lost cause, mythology, propaganda film about how Black people were happy to be slaves, just ridiculous nonsense. So, move forward into 1960s, people were like calling out Atlanta, like for, hey, like Jim Crow lives here. You had SNCC, you had the Atlanta University centers, some of the students at Spelman Morehouse who were organizing sit-ins in Atlanta. And the city of Atlanta was like, well, hey, because of this process that they put in place, they're like, hey, they start calling some of them Spelman presidents, like, hey, tell these Negroes to calm down. Atlanta's cool. So so there's always been like, there's always been this class divide in Atlanta, where many within the Black bourgeoisie, they see Atlanta as a place of progress, because they can own some of their token businesses downtown, and some of their they have the little black capitalist token restaurants in the Atlanta, in the Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, the world's busiest airport. But the reality has go ahead.
Just real quick, say that who the Hartsfield was who?
Hartsfield Jackson, but Jackson brought the flipping airport here.
Exactly.
It is because of Jackson that we even have an airport, but the racist white man gets his name up there first.
Exactly.
Hartsfield Jackson.
But Maynard is the Jackson, and who was Hartsfield? I don't know who the Hartsfield was.
He was one of the mayors of Atlanta. One of the early mayors.
Oh, okay.
William, I
Okay.
believe, is the first name.
But his name
But
goes first, right?
but so I will reference, not to get in discussion about Killer Mike, but so when Killer Mike, he did an interview about.
Let's talk about it.
Well, he did an
Don't
interview
talk about my
Bill
buddy.
Maher.
It's
Don't
all
talk about my
right.
buddy.
He's still lame.
We can talk about it. We can talk about it.
All your friends ain't got to be friends.
When he did an interview on the favorite liberal white supremacist show of Bill Maher, because he goes on there a lot. He referenced how Maynard Jackson was the first Black mayor of Atlanta. And when he got in power, he made sure that Black business people got contracts, because before they were excluded from the contracts. And I thought to myself, well, damn, like them contracts, that only helped out like a small, very, very small kind of well-connected minority, of Black business construction people within the city. But that was like the thing that he like mentioned is like why he was so happy that Maynard Jackson was the first mayor, and proud, and I was just like, okay, like so the fuck what? Like, I mean, but that kind of goes back. I mean, but it's interesting to note, and essentially, under Maynard Jackson's reign is when we had the Atlanta child murders. So I always say that Atlanta is the white supremacy mecca with the Black face.
It is.
We are the whites. I mean, keep in mind, like 30 miles from Atlanta, you have the site of the nation's biggest ethnic cleansing in Forsyth County, the county where David Duke got his start, and where Marjorie Taylor Greene was raised. And and to this day, it is an all-white county.
The county where Oprah did a whole TV show.
In 1988.
Yes, in the 80s, and they were saying how they didn't want Black people in there. I mean, come on now.
Hosea Williams went up there, the person that marched with MLK, and he had crackers, was throwing rocks at him and telling him, in order to keep Forsyth safe, we need to keep Forsyth white. And to this day, it is all white. I mean, just recently, I think the Biden administration said, I mean, when they did all these book bans, which they said harmed, Black and LGBT children, they said that the book bans violated the civil rights. So this is and also 30 miles east of Atlanta is the world's biggest white supremacy monument where the Klan had their rebirth. Stone Mountain Park, which is still today has Confederate flags, lost cause.
Confederate monument, biggest Confederate monument that there is.
So you can't.
I just want to say before I forget again, because when the 1906 Atlanta massacre or riot was raised, I forgot, of course, today, but I like to remind myself and everyone that Du Bois, even while living there, sat out on his porch with a shotgun and said, the first white man that steps on my property is getting shot. So even Du Bois, for all the guff he gets, was on the porch with a shotgun. Like, I still know what time it is. First one getting it. And amen to that. Amen. And pass the ammunition, as they say.
There were a lot of white folks. I think close to about 14 to 20 white people died during that race massacre. So it wasn't just Black people getting killed. A lot, like I said, white people was getting their heads blown off. They were.
Well, we can't have that. We can't have that, especially, they need to be able to attack Black people in safety. And
that's right. And not be prosecuted for it.
No,
they need to be able to do this with the consent of the state.
Yes.
And it's going to be much easier if Cop City is right there to remind us of what our charge is: to be subservient, to serve capitalism, to serve racism, to serve under the will of this Black ruling misleadership class that is really being run by the white people. And all of this stuff that you see is nothing but whitewashing in blackface.
So I do want to ask, because, Killer Mike is my buddy. He asked me at one point to mentor him.
Did he mean it?
No.
I haven't heard from him since, and we're heading into 2 years. But I'm confident he's on his way.
Okay.
He's just got to be patient. But the last time I did reach out to him was around this issue, and it was, and he unfortunately told me to leave him alone and to lose his number. But at the time when I still had his number, and for the record, whenever anyone tells me that, that's it. They'll never hear from me again. I am not a stalker. The moment you say leave me alone, that's it. So I haven't contacted him since I erased the number, but I did text him to ask if he had said anything about Cop City.
He has not.
No.
And he probably won't. It's not good for his business. He is deeply associated with Republican Governor Brian Kemp. He, says it, period, that Brian Kemp is good for his business. He believed even during the last governor's election, he was not coming out, in favor of Stacey Abrams and was pretty much just saying, hey, Kemp is doing a better job at this than her. So I won't be surprised if he wins. Well, of course, he wanted him to win. And what's amazing to me about Killer Mike is that I saw him show up at Atlanta City Hall and request an audience with the mayor to speak with him when there was the question of an ordinance that was being introduced to curtail some of the nightlife in the city of Atlanta proper. However, he has never spoken about Cop City. He never even stood with us in support of closing the Atlanta City Detention Center, which is one of those things that was built specifically for poor Black people leading up to the 1996 Olympics so that the city of Atlanta could clean up the streets for the Olympic Committee and for the Olympic Games. Literally, you had officers walking around in the city of Atlanta with pre-printed tickets that said Black male homeless, and they would write them to people, put them in jail. That jail was full during the Olympics. And afterward, once people finally began to get processed, what was found was that most of the people who were there were simply there for houselessness. They did not have a permanent residence, but it was against poor Black people, right? Then you fast forward years later and the city detention center is still open, but at any given time, that jail would probably house 50 people max. And they were literally.
First of all, that's the dictator way, though. That's the dictator way. When you have an event, the houselessness get rounded up, the thugs, whoever else get rounded up, put in jail. So the events.
And they took down the Confederate flag. They took down the Confederate flag for the
temporarily
for that time, only for that time, though, right? Only for that time. And so now you fast forward all these years later, when we were in the Communities Over Cages Coalition fighting against the closing of fighting for the closing of ACDC, where there might have been 50 people in that jail on any given night simply because they couldn't afford their bail, right? So it became known as a pauper's prison because people were there really because of money. They could not afford bail, and they could be in there on a misdemeanor, but they couldn't afford bail. So they sat there. And when we came together to say, close this shit down, do something else with this. You have a huge houseless population. You just closed the facility at Peachtree and Pine Streets, where many of them could go for shelter. You are contributing to this problem. It's up to you to remedy this issue. The city of Atlanta and Mayor Andre Dickens, who was the person who proposed the ordinance or resolution to close the Atlanta City Detention Center. Now you got him backtracking now that he's the mayor named Dre. And instead of closing that facility, you are now pushing for a partnership.
Is that how he's doing it?
With Sheriff
the mayor
Matt
named
Labott.
Dre?
Absolutely. Look, now, midnight basketball is extremely important to Dre, all right? Because he want these children balling. He want to make sure that
God,
they know
midnight basketball. How long are we going to do this? This is like my childhood. They still doing this?
With his initials on them. He wants them to know now that he's something like a millionaire up in here. But call me Dre, because I'm going to solve all your problems, Black people, by midnight basketball. Oh, and that $20 million that I was going to put into childcare has yet to materialize. So, yeah, figure out how to take care of your children yourself.
Well, I don't know. It's going to be hard for me to get Killer Mike back on your team if he won't. If I've been told not to text him anymore, we can't.
Yeah,
I did my best. But
what I will say is that I don't care for him to be on my team, because anybody who's a real one who I want on my team ain't gonna recognize him no way. Anybody who I want on my team is not gonna roll with him because they've already seen the shucking and jiving. They have seen the first class cooning that he did right after Rayshard Brooks was murdered. There is nobody that I associate with or want to be associated with who's checking for him. Like, nobody's checking for that dude, I promise you.
I don't know. He told me he was I'm sorry. He told me he was the real thing. So I'm sorry.
He and T.I., they have that moniker for some, and there are some people who will buy into that. Some of the less politically educated people, I'll say. There are some people who are just now being politicized, and they've seen sound bites from them that make sense, but they aren't around to see the hypocrisy and to see them do the exact opposite of some of the things that they've talked about. They were not here, some of them, to see them telling people to go home, and they're more concerned about a corporation's window being broken than making sure Black people are taken care of. Like, that's not something that I can ever see myself getting down with. The man is extremely intelligent, and it's quite a waste.
No question.
It really is a waste. But, and the same thing with T.I. T.I. ain't no dummy. You know, he just, they just bootlickers. I mean, I don't know what else to really call it.
It's time to forget about Dre James. We gotta,
he finna go. I'm telling you right now, that's a one-term mayor right there. My granny already told me his time is up.
Well, and to be clear, the entire
must be true.
No, go ahead, Zara.
No, I'm sorry. I was just saying if Brandy says so, it's a wrap. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
The entire hip hop community here, you know, because Atlanta now is like the hip hop capital. The entire hip hop community, you know, there's just the whole black entertainment industrial complex, but from Tyler Perry to the entire hip hop community, there's not been a single Black celebrity figure who, I mean, all of them support police. Every single last one of them.
Well, that was the one thing I meant to say earlier. I'm glad you mentioned it, because we're going to get, I mean, if you can imagine the brilliant documentaries and films that we're going to get from his new expansive studio complex about cops in Cop City, this is about to be magical. We're about to enter a magical moment of narratives and storytelling, where we could literally get a film like Black Hawk Down produced by Tyler Perry, where the setting is Atlanta or some other Black community here in the United States. It'll be remarkable, and it'll be an all Black production, soundtrack and music from Killer Mike and T.I. It'll be remarkable.
Sounds like it.
That's when they'll comment on the story of Cop City, and as they tell us how wonderful it has been. Just very quickly, a big shout out to Teresa for joining. Welcome. Thank you, S. Barros. Cop City has implications for every city. Thank you, CMB and BPM. Right on.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Infinite Content. I'll say again, police serve their own interests first, and then those of capital next. And they're the only unions that take actions against labor. That's deep. True. And Al Unique, I feel like, is re-upping his membership. So welcome back. I feel like that has already taken place. Any last thoughts or anything that we didn't cover that we want to get to before we start heading towards a close here this afternoon? And if there are any comments or questions real quick that I missed, please put them in the chat. But anything that we didn't get to that that you would want to bring up?
I think we pretty much covered it all. What I will say in closing is that the reason why people are fighting so hard against Cop City is because of the intersectional implications of such a project. The intersectionality in this movement cannot be denied. This is a project that affects us on all levels: economic justice, environmental justice, reproductive justice, racial justice. There is no part of our daily living that is not touched by the inception of a project like this. And should we allow this to be built, then watch out, world, because they already done told y'all that the Germans are here. And I will say, das ist totale Scheiße. Sie sind ganzige, blöde, dummes Cuba.
Excuse me.
What is we doing?
Not just playing. What?
Yeah. So I
the Germans. What was my in what was the movie? with Brad Pitt where he's playing a
no,
Irish dude?
don't do it to me. Don't do it to me.
The
Dude, don't do
Germans.
the Django to me, man. Come on.
Not
man.
Django. No,
Okay,
not
okay.
Django. I'm talking about the movie with Brad Pitt, not the other white boy, where he's playing an Irish dude who fights Snatched. And Snatched, the bald dude, who's the bald action dude? He kept saying, "You worried about the Germans coming?" But anyway, break that down for us. That was deep. I wasn't ready for that. Yeah.
Literally, all that means is that's total bullshit. They're all dumbass cows. Like, nah, it's not a. This is not a good thing for us. Not a good thing for us.
Yeah, right. And I mean, I'll add so. Because we didn't talk about Tortuguita's murder, but yeah, Tortuguita was Afro-queer, Afro-Brazilian environmentalist who was tragically murdered by a firing squad by 8 different Georgia State Patrol officers, I believe on January 18th, with their hands up. They did not have any gunpowder residue on their hands. And this was a police raid that had Georgia State Patrol, the DeKalb County Police, the FBI, DHS, ICE. Georgia Bureau of Investigations, and it was a political assassination. Before they did the raid, I think GBI, had told some of the, had told the officers that this defend the Atlanta Forest movement is classified by Homeland Security as violent extremists. They are well organized. They are well funded. They use violent tactics. They often, like, if you go into the forests, because a lot of them, if you go into the forest, a lot of them will throw their shit at you, like their feces, which is going to be contaminated with HIV, an allusion to them, a lot of them being queer. So they had a lot of the homophobia mixed in there. So these cops, they went in there ready to rumble and ready to kill somebody, and that's exactly what happened. So definitely want to, honor their name, because that was a very tragic loss. And as I've stated to many people, that this movement against Cop City, this is a part of the Biden's administration's war on the left. Essentially, anti-Cop City activists are considered to be domestic terrorists by the FBI, by the Department of Homeland Security. And right after January 6th, when all the white supremacists stormed the Capitol, there was a memo that was released, on Twitter that said that, environmentalists, racial justice activists, anarchists, pro-choice activists are domestic terrorists in the same light as people who are as Klansmen, as neo-Nazis, and it was, many on the left had kind of raised some red flags, like, hey, we need to be careful because Biden and FBI, they're going to start waging the war on the left wing. Because whenever there's a war on terror, it's always going to be against the left and against Black people and against the marginalized. And FBI, DHS, they're heavily involved in this movement and the crackdown. As Biden mentioned in his 2021 State of the Union speech, fund the police. This is a part of funding the police. They want to fund police training because in their minds, police need more training on how not to kill Black people, when in reality, the police training is about killing Black people. But this whole building of police infrastructure, which is, Cop City right here in Atlanta, is just going to be like the first chess piece, because they plan on building cop cities. And even some of the civil rights leaders even announced this, some of the Black civil rights leaders, they want to use this Cop City template and the federal crackdown against it as a template to be used all around the country. So they're going to build a Cop City in Atlanta, then in Pittsburgh, then in Chicago, then in LA. They plan on building Cop Cities all throughout the world, because as America comes apart, as future World War III against China and Russia, continues to wage on, as the left becomes more radicalized, militant, as Black people start demanding their rights, as queer people start demanding their rights, as women start demanding their rights, the cops are right there to beat people over the top of their heads, for those who want to stand up for their rights. So that's why they need these militarized cop cities. So this is definitely a nationwide movement. You know, and like I said, I mean, I think FBI right after Tortuguita was murdered, they were looking at bringing federal domestic terrorism charges, and I think that investigation is still ongoing. So definitely, please get involved. You can go to communitymovementbuilders.org. They are having a city council meeting on June 5th where you can voice your public opposition at Atlanta City Council. And yeah, please get involved.
Thank you for that. The link to the CMB website is in the show description, as now is the article I referenced earlier from Scalawag, if anybody wants to see more about that. No, thanks for that. Kiana, anything else? Did you wrap up?
No, that's it.
Okay, right on.
That is it. Thanks so much for having us on.
Anytime. You're both welcome back at any point. Just holler at us, and we don't need come out to be involved. So whenever you want to do it, just holler. You come on through. No, all jokes. Yeah, seriously. Thank you very much. Shout out to Community Movement Builders. Really appreciate you. Keep up the good work, and thanks again for coming through today. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Right on. All right, everybody. Big shout out to Community Movement Builders and Kamal, who helped put that together, who sort of quarterbacked that for us here today. Appreciate that. It was great to build with Kiana and Curtis, and to build with all of you in the chat here today. So thank you all for coming through. Those who will see and hear this later, big shout out to you as well. Definitely, if we missed anything, make sure you
put it in the comments,
and we'll be sure to get the
message.
Even if you tell me
it's wrong, bro,
it's all good, because we just definitely don't want
got punked again.
can't let that happen. Anyway, big shout out to everybody. I feel good. It's been a great morning and afternoon. I always appreciate good conversation, and I feel a little bit like this.
Did you call bank? I call gang.
That's how I feel after conversations like that. So peace, everybody. Like Fred Hampton used to say, if you're willing to fight for it, find any way you can to support the platform and help us continue to grow. Thank you very much in advance, and catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like and throughout the BPM platform. Peace, everybody.
I mix what I like, what I like. Wait a minute. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Well, everybody, wait a minute. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Everybody, wait a minute. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.